Emily, can you still hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, because I had something come up that, anyway. And then we talk about the basic privacy that's denied. There's a lack of privacy, and part of that being, I'm subject to search and seizure and I guess I was going to say humiliation, but I don't want to go that far, although there could be a part of that, right? So that basic privacy is denied. My safety, my personal space, not only safety for self, but I've seen a lot of things happen around me that could bring up things for myself as well. Loss of personal possessions, car, home, all of these things that I've got to be thinking about that I left behind. Are they going to be there when I get out? What's going to happen to my car, my home, family, that sort of thing? Again, the financial piece. I'm not providing for my family now. Having funds available to me while I'm inside, because a person that doesn't have any money available to them on the inside certainly is, basic needs are provided. But the lack of, being able to purchase anything or again, not just that part, but being able to provide for my family, kids, children outside of prison. Another main concern and stressor can be health, medication. If I was on medication, now it may take a little while to get put back on medication, and whether I'll be put on the correct medication can be another concern. My health, where am I at in that, is my health a concern? That can be a stressor. And then we talk about what else. There's a lot of other things that may come up for people. And so, let's see here. I want to talk a little bit about the culture of incarceration and learned behaviors. And give me 1 second, please. Let me advance this forward until. That first bullet point there, it says segregation. Does it still exist? And from my research and talking with people, it does still exist. And it's a big part of being incarcerated, especially from what I know, the male prisons. Segregation is very much a part of that, and gang life. So I'm going in, whether I was part of a gang or not, on the outside, I'm going in probably having to choose whether I'm going to be part of one or not, and if I choose not to, the ramifications from that, okay? Or if I choose to be in the gang, what does that all involve? It's much different than on the outside. And I think, from what I understand, it's not as prevalent in the female prisons, but it certainly can be. And so those are just some things to think about. That second bullet point, hierarchy of power among inmates. There's definitely that. And, inmates with mental, physical disabilities can and are preyed upon. So I may be going into prison with mental health diagnosis, and then I've got to also be careful of being vulnerable, right? Certain crimes are frowned upon and others are glorified. And so if I think about that, vulnerability is seen as a weakness, And then people with mental or physical challenges may be taken advantage of or preyed upon. And then if I have a crime that I've been convicted of that involves children, sexual or physical crimes against women, violent crimes against the elderly, those are generally frowned upon. So I'm at another disadvantage if I'm going in with that stigma attached. And then there's those crimes that are glorified, and generally those are righteous murder, attempted robbery, car theft, that sort of thing. So some things to consider there for sure. Let me see here. Some of the social values that are learned in prison, dislike and distrust of people and systems, whatever those systems may be, anything that was involved in putting me inside, depending on how I see that, I might be I could be very angry, that at the system as a whole, prison guards being part of that system, so my anger towards them might be prevalent, and just the distrust. Maybe even if I feel I've been wrongly accused, there's certainly going to be a distrust of people and systems. Prison has its own language, and you start to learn that as, the longer you're incarcerated, the prison language. And saying that, a person is also coming out with those. I'm learning all this culture of incarceration, these learned behaviors. Then when I'm released, I'm still coming out with all that. And I've got to relearn how to be in society. Again, which I'll get to in a moment, because that's going to be the focus of this, of the training and this webinar. Some of the language that was shared with me from inmates, which I thought I'd just share with you because I thought they were kind of interesting. So a 4 is a 4-year sentence. Bang weights, that means to work out in the gym. Boss is a prison officer. Burn means tobacco. So just some interesting, language that comes up for people. And I think also what I know about that too is I'm going into prison with a certain facade or a certain role I've been playing in society. And then I'm going in, and all of a sudden that role changes. Because a lot of it becomes about survival, right? And we talk about survival strategies and coping behaviors. So, I'm going to go, I may isolate. I might be a person that isolates or tries to be invisible, not to show emotion, avoid eye contact. I want to concentrate on doing my own time, not somebody else's time. Looking the other way, in other words, that I see nothing type of survival technique, really. Let's see. And then, if I look at, excuse me, just one sec. Get a drink. Some of the psychological consequences of incarceration. And this, I'm talking about this, it can be, it's not always, because it says diminished sense of self-worth. It can also go the opposite way. But a lot of times what we see is that diminished sense of self-worth, right? In other words, excuse me just one sec. You know, I had all these things outside of prison. I was confident. I was, independent. Maybe doing well. Had money, all that type of stuff. And then I get inside, and I'm not such. Things change, right? So my self-worth, my confidence can be affected. Self-esteem. That sort of thing. Again, vulnerability is seen as a weakness, and people coming in with disabilities can certainly have a more difficult time. I'm just trying to advance my other screen here. There is consequences of that crime, that the surface story, and I could start thinking about irrational thoughts may occur. In other words, this shouldn't happen to me. Again, that thought of distrust of systems and people, and irrational thoughts may start to occur. This shouldn't have happened. What if? Blaming others. That lack of maybe accountability, which could be justified or not, right? But I could start thinking those things, right? And that can create more of that resentment, which brings up anger and that sort of thing. Hopes and dreams are temporarily lost, maybe for a long time or maybe even forever, So some of these things that start to take place. Feelings of shame, guilt, hopelessness. I'm not out there taking care of my business, and now I'm feeling guilty for the consequences to my children, to my family, to those that believed in me and cared about me. Certainly those feelings can come up. And that feeling of hopelessness and maybe even helplessness. We have that independence and self-initiative are muted, right? Hypervigilant, maybe on high alert due to threat or personal risk. I'm having to watch my back. I'm having to be aware of my surroundings more so than maybe before when I was not incarcerated. That mask of tough guy or tough persona. If I show any type of vulnerability, that invites exploitation, social withdrawal, isolation, depression. If I'm a person that's going in to incarceration with already mental health diagnosis, and then maybe I'm set apart, put in isolation, maybe set apart from other inmates, and that depression or that mental health diagnosis can intensify. And we see that often. Interpersonal and intrapersonal skills are hindered. I'm not having the interactions with people as I'm used to. So am I aware of others' desires, motivations? I start to even lose, my own level of what my goals, my hopes and dreams are, what my level of, what's motivating me, to move forward in life. All those things can be hindered due to where I am and being locked up inside. Okay. Then We spend quite a bit of time on trauma, and especially for individuals with mental health and or substance use challenges. And, as a person goes into incarceration, there's that mindset, that I've got to be able to survive in here. And that's usually what kicks in, is those survival mechanisms. Substances are just as available inside as they are out. And I can continue with that substance use. And many do. I think it's 50 or higher, I would say even higher, percent of individuals that are going in with substance use challenges are continuing that use inside. But if you think about that, that's a different kind of use, because now I'm locked up inside. There's rules, regulations. If I'm caught, the ramifications of that are going into isolation, being set apart. Again, I'm set apart from everybody else, and I'm only, I could be isolated for days or months, even years. Mental health starts to deteriorate, starts to be more prevalent. Maybe even a person going in and then diagnosed in prison, which, I want to kind of back up a little bit. I want to say this. Those that are supporting and are working inside the prison systems, I believe majority are doing their best for the safety of the inmate and doing their best to, provide that safe environment and also give them the treatment that they're needed. It's sometimes a very slow process, and a lot of times people may not be treated for what they are needing to be treated for. So I don't want to put blame on anybody or any one system. I think everybody's working together to have the best outcome, but we don't always see the best outcome. So I want to talk a little bit more about trauma. And I get this information, a lot of the information that I got, like I said, I did research, talked to many people, went inside the prisons, and talked to people, and got the stories of others. And I also took the core competencies of SAMHSA, and they had put together core competencies for peer support specialists, justice-involved peer support specialists. So I really took a good look at those to see what was involved, especially in the trauma piece. And these are some of the things that my research brought up, especially the causes of trauma. Give me 1 second. Let me advance my slide over here. So that many inmates with mental health challenges are kept isolated from others for their safety, for other reasons, right? And so, again, I talked about that briefly a moment ago. When they're kept isolated, that depression can even intensify, or mental health challenges can intensify, okay? The use of force, restraints, or searches can certainly be causes of trauma. And we know that this is pretty prevalent inside the prison system, whether it's founded or not. But a use of restraints by prison guards, that sort of thing, is pretty prevalent. Denying privileges and requests. That's just the privilege to go to commissary, which is, being able to purchase your own food. And if I'm a person that goes in there and I have no money coming in at all, I'm not even going to be able to purchase some things that I would want to have, such as, food or hygiene items. And although those things are provided, they're not always provided in the quantity that I might need. Denying those requests, whatever that might be, privileges and requests. Harassment, it does exist, and racist behavior, it does exist. We're human, and that's always going to be a factor. I don't ever see that going away. I wish I could say it would, but I don't see that going away. The human factor is involved. Sexual harassment. This I found astonishing, actually. The percentage of people that are sexually abused or harassed in prison, and this is male and female, was astonishing to me. And it's a huge problem. And I'll tell you what, if I'm going into prison, and remember, safety is a key element of the criminal justice system. If I'm going into prison and I'm being harassed by other inmates or even prison employees, or I am being sexually abused, that's definitely a huge cause of trauma for many. And if I have experienced that childhood trauma or that type of trauma before being incarcerated, that can re-trigger, re-traumatize, and put a person in a place where they are, what am I trying to say? Anyway, re-traumatizing or re-triggering thoughts of that childhood abuse or trauma, and can put somebody in a place where they may have a very difficult time coming back from that. We talk about language barriers. This is something that, I think it's better now. I really do. But there's still that language barrier of, English being our, main language, primary language, and Spanish, of course. But if I'm going into a prison system where my language isn't spoken, that can be very, very difficult. I'm trying to ask for certain things. I'm trying to get certain information, and that language barrier can be a definite cause of trauma for some individuals. We hear about that overcrowding, some of the living conditions can certainly cause trauma. I have a nephew that is currently incarcerated, and the fights and proximity to violent encounters has been the hardest thing for him, the most difficult thing. And again, remember, we see nothing, right? We see nothing, we say nothing. And he said that has been so hard for him because he's seen, fights that have ended in somebody passing away. And had he been able to speak up, might have been able to prevent that for that person. But you can't do that in there because you may be that next person, and that puts you in a vulnerable place. And just seeing fights, not even with, myself, right, but seeing fights around creates that very unsafe environment and just can be a huge cause of trauma. We see that exposure to harsh and unwavering discipline, sometimes founded and sometimes not, right? I mean, if we think about that, I could be, if I'm a prison worker and I have some things going on at home or something I left that morning and just am having a bad day, may I take that out on an inmate? Absolutely. Again, it's that human, of course we're not supposed to. We have those ethics, those guidelines in place. But again, as a human being, I can certainly be susceptible to that. Let's see what else. I think a person has to quickly learn how to survive. I have, and I'm imagining that a lot of us have seen some documentaries and information on, people being imprisoned in other countries. And the one that comes to mind for me is Germany. How they're very focused on rehabilitation and not so much locking people up and just having them sit in there and do their time. I found that fascinating. And the recidivism rate for this particular prison and this community had greatly been reduced by the rehabilitation that they are involved in the prison systems in Germany. And I would really like to see us here in the States get to that point. I thought it was amazing. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, please do. So SAMHSA puts out 6 key concepts about trauma-informed approach and why it's important. That first one being safety. And I think this is important for us to know, and as a peer support specialist, I want to have information about what I can do to help somebody that may be, coming out of incarceration and has experienced trauma inside. What can I do as a peer support specialist to support the safety, that trustworthiness and transparency? Of course, that peer support, working alongside that person, supporting them through reentering, collaboration and mutuality. I'm no better than. And my thought on this training and what we are putting forth is that a person that is taking this training, which is a 2.5-day training, which with the third day, which is a half a day, all role plays. Okay, I'm coming into this justice-involved peer support training. I have also had the initial peer support training myself before I can take this training. Okay, so I already have these things that I know, the key concepts, what peer support's about, the collaboration, the mutuality. Excuse me, my voice is leaving me. I want to definitely promote that empowerment, voice, and choice of the person. And also be aware of cultural, historical, and gender issues. I need to be educated on that so I don't set anybody aside or, want to know the culture and be sensitive to that, right? Everybody deserves fair, unbiased, non-judgmental support. And if I'm not aware of those things, I might violate that. Okay? see. A couple of the strategies that I came up with that I would want to, if I'm thinking about the 6 key concepts. Number 1, regarding safety, and this is for me as a peer support specialist, what I will commit to when I'm supporting people coming out of incarceration. I will be diligent around keeping my word and mindful of not promising things that I am unsure of or that are outside of my scope of work. I want to be very upfront with the person. I want to let them know what I can and can't do. And that if I don't have an answer for something, I'm going to say I don't know. But I will support you in finding out those answers. I don't want to not promise something that I don't know or I'm not sure of. And then number 2, I will continually empower the person by listening to them, validating, and honoring their choices. Now, is there some collaboration that goes on here? Absolutely. If someone is, coming out of incarceration and the first thing they say that they want to do is go connect with some of their old friends, some of their old peers, I want to talk with them about that. I want to collaborate on some of the choices that they're making and pros and cons, to going to visit old neighborhoods, old friends. What are some of the consequences of that? Okay. Number 3, I will celebrate diversity and remain open-minded to those I serve, using my natural curiosity as a bridge builder. So I'm curious about your culture. Can you tell me more? I'm curious about those things that are going to support you and help you be successful and not go back to prison. Use that natural curiosity to be a bridge builder. Okay. Emily, I see there's some questions. Do I need to stop for a moment?
No, you're good. Those are all just technology questions from earlier on.
Okay. All right. Another thing that I want to talk about in this training, which I think is huge, is those systems and structure of judicial systems. The mental health court. What does that include? What does that look like? Because a lot of people will be coming out with those in place, and how can I, as a peer support specialist, having some knowledge of that is going to be important. Drug court, those diversion programs, what do those look like? Pre-release, hopefully my idea of this is a person that is going to be taking this training, which I had said earlier and then I didn't complete what I wanted to say, is a person that does have the peer support training, but also has, that experience of being incarcerated themselves. So they'll have some information about pre-release 6 months prior, who's involved, what's involved, and so they'll have some information about that. So when that person comes out that they're supporting, they'll know a little bit about that. Okay. Let me see here. And I'm actually going to be doing, I'm going to have the participants in this training actually research the mental health court, the drug court pre-release, and they're going to present on that. So we have a good information about that. And so here's the good stuff, and this is what I really want to talk about and focus on in this training is integration, reintegration, and reentry. Okay. And I believe this is where peer support can be extremely helpful as they walk alongside a person to support in navigating services. Okay. before I move into this, I want to share a story with you. And this was from a female that shared a little bit of her story with me. And she said, and these are her words, "Prison was difficult, but getting out was even more so. I can remember vividly the excitement I felt when I was being released from prison after serving a 4-year sentence. I had so many things I wanted to do and needed to accomplish. The first was getting a job so I could get a place of my own, bring my children back home with me. Soon after being released, reality sunk in. I was living in a sober living environment, looking for work, trying to reconnect with my children and family, needing clothing, working on obtaining ID, Social Security card, birth certificate, all the things that are involved in that, which wasn't an easy task. There were hoops to jump through. Looking for a doctor to treat my hepatitis C and depression, mental health, and also a primary care physician to continue my healthy lifestyle and what I needed to do. Finding a 12-step meeting to attend, which I needed to attend every day for my commitment to the sober living environment. Finding a sponsor, going to meet with my parole officer every week, if not more, community service hours, dropping UAs, weekly meetings with the organization that helped me pre-release and also release. And this was just to name a few. And she was doing all this by navigating the bus system in Phoenix, Arizona. Luckily, it wasn't in the summer. It was in the winter. But again, never having used the bus system before, that was in itself something to learn. And then, of course, she says, most importantly, in my mind was filling out necessary paperwork to file with the court to bring my children back home. And the list seemed endless. It seemed like I was going nowhere fast. And this isn't a unique story, folks. This is universal. And this is just a few of the things. And all of these things costing money, which a person may not have. Okay? And so, with that being said, I want to talk about, legal obligations. And I'll go through this. I know we're kind of running out of time, but, there's court fees, there's probation, parole fees, there's court-ordered treatment, there's child support, maybe spousal support. Prior to incarceration, loans, obligations. And then I want to start working on restoration of rights. All of these things not being easy and many hoops to jump through. Okay? And then if I look at some of those reentry barriers, housing is huge. I don't know about you guys, but the crime-free housing makes it very challenging to find a place to live. I can remember supporting people that were coming out of incarceration, and they were trying to find apartments, and many of them would not allow them in with that background. And when they did find a place, it wasn't in the best area. And also, I can remember this, helping an individual find an apartment, and the first person that they saw at that apartment complex was somebody they were in prison with, right? So that can certainly happen. Public transportation, employment, who's going to hire me? Am I going to be doing telemarketing the rest of my life? Which I loved about peer support because, as we know, credentials for peer support is to have some of these, this background, right? So it was actually a plus and not a minus. Depending on how long I've been incarcerated, the technology can be definitely a barrier. Stimuli, distractions, going from being structured versus freedom. Inside, I'm told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, why to do it, what to wear, all that. Then I'm coming out and I have this freedom to choose. That can be very overwhelming for people, especially if they've had a long sentence been incarcerated for a long time. I want to develop new relationships. You know, those old relationships may not be healthy ones. Let's see. And again, maybe I've burned a lot of bridges. Maybe I don't have any support. My peer support is the only support I have right now. So as a peer support specialist, I want to help that person to start developing those community supports. Really important, really important. Finding those healthy relationships, finding those recovery environments that are so important to a person's recovery. Okay. The stigma that comes along with a person coming out of incarceration. If I'm coming out of incarceration with not only I'm an ex-felon, I've also got mental health diagnosis. Now I've been maybe I'm coming out with substance use. Maybe I didn't even go in with substance use challenges, but I'm coming out with those. Who knows? There could be a lot of things that might stigmatize a person in that situation. Okay. Reentry barriers, institutionalized, may cause loss of knowing how to do things for self, or even how to refrain from doing those things that may be harmful. May miss important clues and cues, right? Children, family back in life may be unclear on how to fit back into the family unit, parenting, sibling role. I think another thing that's important here is knowing that when I went in and did my time, my children and family still went on with their life and had to adjust. So coming out and trying to be super parent or super sibling or whatever that may be, I have to realize that for my children, for my family, I may be coming out thinking I've got to make up for all this lost time, when in fact what they need from me is normalcy. They just need to maybe to kind of fit back into that role and not overwhelm them with my need to be that super person, super mom, super parent, super spouse, whatever that may be. And then, again, that lack of support we already talked about. Time restraints and task saturation. It may be difficult for a person to prioritize needs and obligation. Urgency to get one's life back in order may cause a sense of overwhelmness. You know, so as a peer support specialist, I can help that person prioritize, what's most important, what's going to help you to be successful. Let's talk about that. Let's prioritize your list, because that urgency for that need to have everything back in my life right away and make up for that lost time can be overwhelming. Peer pressure, challenges saying no to old friends and old habits. Again, that being in non-recovery environments. Need to connect, social skills inhibited due to lack of emotional intelligence, those interactions. Lot to think about for a person. Okay. So let's talk about overcoming those barriers and how peer support can be most helpful. We can help collaborate and identify priorities. Best if that person takes the lead. Identify and develop resources needed, make a plan of action. Support and identifying healthy supporters. Who are they, and what's their role in the person's life? And that could change daily, monthly, whatever. So we want to make sure that we're aware of that and they're aware of that. You know, maybe this person sounds like a good person to be supportive, but maybe it ended up not so much. Peer support specialists share parts of their story that supports healthy change. Again, I say this again, let the person take the lead, but we also collaborate on that. Be fully present with the person in a way that validates and reinforces their abilities and strengths. Remember, they might be coming out with lower self-esteem, lower self-worth. We want to help reinforce that we believe in them and reinforce their abilities and their strengths. Even, I like to ask the person, what strengths are you bringing to the table? What's going to benefit you most? And if they, and help them identify that and build on those. And I think it's really important as a peer support specialist that I point out their progress, ability to overcome challenges and barriers. I think it's important we have a plan A, plan B, plan C, and so on. Okay. Things I want to consider and ask myself as a peer support, supporting anybody, but we're talking about justice involved. I want to be aware of my own potential for bias. Is something about this person reminding me of my own stuff? Is it re-traumatizing me? Is it triggering me in some way? I need to be aware of that and have tools in place so I know what to do. Because I certainly don't want to have those judgmental or bias. I know there's a potential for that, but I need to be very aware of that so that does not happen. Expect urgency from the person, making up for that lost time, rebuilding of life. Expect loss, grief, lack of self-worth, lower self-esteem, or the exact opposite. It's important that we demonstrate patience and understanding as a peer support specialist. Again, many individuals have experienced trauma, ridicule, lack of respect. Important that we keep our word, be accountable in order to build that trusting relationship, which is the foundation of peer support. We want to meet that person right where they're at. How one has experienced incarceration may be completely the opposite for another. So being very aware of that, taking the lead from that person. And then again, talking about maintaining recovery and connection. As a peer support specialist, I want to help the person and not suggest what socially based program would work for them, but see if they're interested in a 12-step, a SMART recovery, a Celebrate recovery, etc. And again, I can use my own story at this time. When I'm maintaining recovery, sharing parts of my story that would connect up with the person, what they're going through and what they're looking for. As long as I'm sharing it from those I statements and not putting that on them that this is what they need to do. Employment training opportunities, we want to help take a look at that, having resources available and knowing what those resources are. Identifying, locating, and obtaining doctor, mental health clinic, whatever that person is needing. Creating those healthy relationships, friends, environments. They may need support with resume writing, submitting applications, again, having resources at my fingertips, or even researching resources with people so that they can, get their needs met. And also approaching people and systems in a way that they can get their needs met. Many times, because of what I've learned in prison, or maybe all I've known all my life, is the way I knew how to get my needs met was not always attractive or didn't work, maybe. And so working with them on how to advocate, if that's needed, in a way that I will get my needs met, and that's respectful with integrity, honesty, and that sort of thing. Let's see. And just real quickly, restoration of rights. This might be something, might not happen it won't happen right away, right? There's certain different states or different, depending on the state you're in, the time that's needed to be out of incarceration, have that discharge, that absolute discharge, all those things in place, parole, all the fees that are associated with coming out of incarceration. Somebody might want to start looking at restoring their rights. And so as a peer support specialist, I can also support in that process. And so talk about that as having the information about that and what that looks like. Okay. And folks, that's what I wanted to share with you. Again, there's a lot that goes into this training, a lot more information. That's the gist of it. And I want to open up to questions or comments and answer those if I can.
So if anyone has questions or thoughts, you can pop them into that chat box and I will read them out loud.
Just while seeing if there's any questions or just comments, really. I'm always open for comments and how to, if there's things I'm missing, I would love to hear that. I'm very open to that. I think what I'm really hoping that we can get to, and I think we've made huge steps in this, but I think there's still a lot to do from what I see and what I've experienced, is getting to a place of rehabilitation for folks. There couldn't be a better time to help somebody, support somebody while they're incarcerated to come out with a vocational skill. And on top of that, I just wanted to say this, peer support inside the prison systems. I know that's happening in some states, and we were actually invited to go into the Pennsylvania prison systems and did peer support training in the prison systems, which was very cool. And it's created not only jobs inside the prison system as peer support specialists. So imagine that, a person working along someone else, navigating inside. They also have their certification, so when they're released, they have that certification already, which helps reduce that recidivism rate because they're already ready to go to work in that field. So that's awesome, and I'd love to see more of that. Okay.
So someone asked about the sequential intercept model.
Yes. What that is for people that are going in, it's a mental health court, and there's different steps that could be taken. So the intercept model is a person that has a mental health diagnosis. Instead of going through the regular court system, they'll go through the mental health court system. And it really is to prevent them from going into incarceration, honestly, so that they can get the mental health that they need, the mental health treatment that they need. And it's a diversion program is what it is. But they can enter that intercept model at different times. It might be somebody was incarcerated, then found out that they had mental health challenges, and then they can go into that intercept model. And if others have more information about that, please share that, as I'm doing some research on that as we speak.
Great, and then we also had a few questions about the full training. Where can people find it, if you can elaborate on it a little bit more?
Sure. We are offering it as part of RI Consulting trainings and our trainings that we have, which are many, and so they can find it on our website. They can also call in and request it and request more information. If hopefully we can put my information up there so they can call me directly and I can give them information about how to set one of those trainings up. And again, the person who's participating in the training will need to have had the initial training, the initial peer support training prior. And this is, I don't want to say add-on, but I guess it is. That would be necessary to get into this training. Again, it's trying to get it down to 2 days, but I'm finding that difficult to do because I think a big part of it is doing role plays, and I don't want to miss that part. So right now I have it at 2.5 days.
I can also include a link to that when I send out the recording and slides in the next few days. I can put on the website link for people to get more information.
Okay. I know there's a huge need for this, and I'm just very excited to be able to offer this.
Well, that's all we have for questions right now. If anyone has any more, you all have my email, so you can email me. You can respond to me in the next few days once I send out the review of this, and I can also get you guys in contact with Vicki if you have further questions. But it seems like we're good for now, unless you have anything.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all those that participated, and I really appreciate that. And again, reach out to me at any time. I'd love to hear from you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.